You're listening to Scars Survivor Hour on Power 95, bringing awareness, hope, and healing for survivors of child sexual abuse.
Welcome, everyone, to our Scars Survivor Hour radio show. I am Debbie Ray Rivers. I am the Executive Director of SCARS, stands for Saving Children and Revealing Secrets. We are a charity whose mission is to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse in our Bermuda community. I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and a mother of 2 survivors. I'm joined today, of course, with Dr. Alicia Hancock, a valued SCARS board member, a friend, and a clinical psychologist with over a decade of wisdom in child sexual abuse. So hi, Dr. Hancock.
Hi there.
You know, Survivor Hour is another platform to spread awareness and to be an advocate and a voice for those who have been sexually molested, as well as their affected families. If you have small children or you work with children, this show is for you. So please, if you can, grab a pen and a piece of paper. We are going to be sharing valuable information that could save your child, could even save someone else's child from trauma, because children can experience trauma when they have been sexually harmed. That is a fact. Today, we have on set a well-known Bermudian. He and I go way back. What I love about him, apart from his beautiful wife, Nicole, is his heart. You know, this guest and I have had some heated discussions over the years, but we also have a mutual respect for one another. One thing we know about each other is our heart for children, and the importance of protection of children in this community. Alicia and I want to welcome Elmore Warren. Elmore is a community activist, a founder of Uptown Market Movement, and a founder of Fresh Start Cooperative Learning Charity, an international award-winning creative director and writer and executive producer and owner of Fresh Creations. So welcome, Elmore.
Geez, I had one of those interests in eons, but good afternoon, everybody. I'm thankful, humble, give thanks to the Most High for allowing me to be able to share with you all today, and being around even Dawn here.
Sure. It's been since the 80s.
my old stomping ground. I used to work here, and good to see him. And good to see you all, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Elmore. And, you know, we know that peer-to-peer abuse is common. It's more common than we think, because we know that abuse can start very early. And if it's not addressed properly and quickly, it could change 2 little lives forever, right? It can start very young. And our hope is that what you hear today will empower you to react responsibly to any child-on-child sexual harm, because the key really is reacting responsibly. You know, this show could be saving grace to a child's emotional well-being, because how we respond could make or break a child's ability to heal. Intervention is critical when it comes to child-on-child abuse, whether it's the child who crossed the boundary of another child or the child who was harmed. Now, before we get into our discussion, I just want to remind everyone about our broadcasting rules. This show contains sensitive information and is intended for adults only. This is a sensitive topic, so when calling into the show at 292-9595, we ask callers, you know, don't mention your name or a perpetrator's name. If you're going to talk about a perpetrator, you know, please don't mention names. We have no way of confirming your testimony. You're welcome to share, but no names mentioned, please. This show is also not meant for personal attack. It's meant to educate and empower and advocate for the precious children in this country. I will say that we are not experts in the law. We can answer questions about sexual abuse and surviving sexual abuse and how to heal from this, and how trauma affects victims of child sexual abuse. Dr. Hancock can answer those questions, but no questions on the law, please. We do not have any legal advice in the studio today. Absolutely no attack on any lawyer, judge, or magistrate. If you are a survivor and you wish to be a guest on the show, we would love to have you. Our hope is to eventually reduce the stigma of child sexual abuse in our community. And trust me, it's still a stigma. But we can do that by talking about this and sharing stories. So, but everybody's journey is different, and it's up to them. The one good thing about when we become adults, we have choices. So you have a choice whether you wish to share your story or not, and that's the wonderful thing. When we're little, things like that are taken from us. We don't have choices, but as adults we do, and so that's the great thing I always say about life is choices. If you're a survivor and you're hesitant about sharing your story on air, that is absolutely okay. You do not need to do that. You have an ability to say no, because your ability to say no when you were little was stripped from you. But as an adult, it's okay to say no to us. We get it. But if you are ready to share your story, please call the SCARS office at 297-2277. Okay, let's get right into this. So let's start with a real life situation, right? A parent receives a disclosure from their little one that another child harmed them sexually. We know that that can be very upsetting for a parent. Your child comes home, whether it's somebody in the home, whether it's another relative, or it's something that happened at school or camp, club, sporting organization. We know that child-on-child, peer-on-peer abuse does happen. We can't minimize it at all. But there's a lot of emotions, right, that can come with that as a parent who hears this from their own little child. I'm going to talk about the little bit of emotions, and I'd love to hear from Elmore and to Alicia on this. So we know that if a parent finds out that their little one has been sexually violated by another little one, it can be shocking, right? I mean, a parent can think, like, how can this happen? Like, they were so young. What did this other child know about this? If the child doesn't tell right away, which I've heard those stories, the parent might think, well, why didn't they tell me right away? Why did they wait to tell me this? Or this was their cousin. Cousins aren't supposed to do that to each other. A parent may even get angry. Like, why did this child do this? How dare they do it? I'm calling up their parents. This is disgusting. They need to be dealt with. That's an emotion that some parents could feel. Or they could just feel fear, right?
And sometimes denial.
Yeah.
Sometimes denial. Sometimes even if your child discloses that they've been touched or sexually abused, the parent may initially be in denial because they don't know how to deal with it or what to do next.
Yeah. Denial could also mean if we don't talk about it, it's going to go away all by itself.
Oh, definitely.
Right? So, just ignoring it, and then I don't think, we'll talk about what that can feel like for a little one whose parents are either angry, either, want to deal with it themselves, call the other family, without pausing and getting some support around that, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. How are you feeling, Elmore?
Education, as we talked on before the mics were turned on, education is the key. And pre-education is the key, see, because you can't expect to react to something you haven't been prepared for to react.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so a lot of times, I think, most of the situations we are getting in is because we are unequipped at the time. Mm-hmm. So, many people don't have it on their front, on their plate until it happens, as opposed to from the time that your children are born till they get an understanding. That should be really, in my mind, right, at the forefront of your child care. Is who's taking care of them, how they're taking care of them, what are the do's and don'ts, what are you looking out for, what are you protecting this child from within your own confines, from your own wife, from your own father, from the, it all has to be a discussion beforehand.
Yeah.
Because when it happens, it's going to be over the top as it is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, from a, an anger perspective, it's going to be over the top. If somebody's violated your child,
Yeah.
it's different if your child has violated somebody, but that energy should still be the same.
Yeah.
Because all children and everybody's impacted.
Yes.
You see, everybody's impacted. It's not a one-way street.
No.
So you got shame and anger coming from one side, and then you got the person who's been abused and hurt, and so it may seem like it's a one-way street, but it's a two-way street. So you got to prepare and start talking about these things before they happen.
And that's why we're here today, right? And
Yeah.
that's why SCARS trains parents and adults in the community to recognize the signs, to react responsibly. That is a huge step in our training, is, learn the facts, talk to your children about body safety and boundaries and consent, but be a parent or guardian that your child can come and tell you. And this is why you're exactly right, Elmore. We've got to talk about this in advance, right? Sorry, everyone. I didn't turn my phone off, and I probably told everybody to turn their phone off. And I apologize. But yeah, we have to be prepared, because it could happen. It could come on our doorstep. I've heard many stories of child-on-child abuse, cousin on cousin, neighbor on a younger child. The most important thing is that we're prepared, as you said, Elmore, and preparation is education. I mean, that's how we prepare, because if we can learn what we need to do before it comes on our doorstep, then we can react responsibly to it. I mean, if it's your child that did something to another child, that's whole different reactions as well, right? Or it could be the same. Well, first of all, like you said, Dr. Hancock, it could be denial.
Yeah, for sure. And, we have to create an environment where children feel comfortable disclosing, even if it's a family member, even if it's a cousin. Because if that has happened where it is a family member, such as a cousin, that can tear the families apart. And so the reaction is very, very crucial to either shutting it down or potentially actually coping and dealing with it properly. But unfortunately, many times when it's within a family, whether it's a cousin or a sibling, a lot of times it goes unreported. Many times siblings will not report if their older sibling has touched them or inappropriately.
Yeah, because they want to protect them. They love them.
Well, but also, first encounters, you don't know what that means.
Correct.
Right.
Right? So, first encounters are first encounters.
Yeah.
So people don't, children don't know what that means,
No.
because that's not even in the scope of thinking in the
Right.
fullness, right? At certain, up until a certain age, of course, right? Because, when I came up, I'm a 60s baby. So we came up in Playhouse and this and that. And I'm sure everybody would know, we came up in Playhouse, they don't. So, relatable, those things are different today because of technology and what people have been exposed to. And so at a younger age, things are far more sinister, real, today than not.
But let's be honest, Elmore. Nobody called a penis years ago.
Wow.
Nobody talked to their children about body safety and sex and boundaries and helping them understand hormones and where this is all coming from. We were so embarrassed and ashamed of the human body. We ourselves as adults, or years ago, not me, but I mean, I followed that pattern. But even going back generations, we didn't talk about sex. Nobody talked about bodies, and your like I said, you couldn't even call a private part the proper name. You had to give it a pet name. We don't have another pet name for our nose. I always say it in our training. But we used to get to the private parts, and you have to call it every name. We could write books on pet names. I mean,
yeah, I guess once again, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be this guy out, because my mom, she hit us with this from young. So.
Love it.
I sure, like the pet names were there, yes. For instance, Potterbox. That was a name I heard my mom say about my sisters, which was Potterbox. And, for me, it was that thing right there, So we had a relation, and I'm thankful for my mom, because basically that was always on the table. in my home. You know what I mean? I came from 5, 2 sisters and 2 brothers, right? So those things were real to me. And I'm thankful because they saved me. They definitely saved me from some very hairy situation.
So can you talk about how that that type of upbringing and helped to facilitate your comfort with knowing yourself well enough, knowing what's right and wrong, knowing how to protect your own body?
Yeah, I think, once again, it's a good question because coming up in a time of I'm going to call it innocent promiscuity, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the primitive nature of our society, which has come up, is, it went from clubbing you over the head and taking you to the bush or the cave or whatever it might be. And then, next thing you know, hey, that happened. You got a baby. On the other side, it became this pleasure principle.
Yes.
Right? And so now the pleasure principle takes you into these spaces and places that become undeniable and uncontrollable things.
And addictive.
Right. Mm-hmm. These things. So for me, we came up, when I used that example as Playhouse, because we were always in a space of, the proximities were close.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So houses got more spread out. So when we got on the edge of doing something stupid, now you children, look, that's your cut. Don't you be doing that. Right? So there were lines always being drawn now. If the neighbor, I go over to a neighbor's house now, and that daughter could have pulled up her dress on me. And I'm like going, oh, shoot. I'm not, what's all that? Right? So that's the difference. And then you start, as I think back, in these spaces, I'm like, well, was she? Because why would she have? Because why would she do that with me if somebody? And was it her older brother or was it a? You see what I'm saying? Like, was it the
She was
daddy?
exposed.
She was exposed
And
because
no one
to do
else
that,
was around.
no one else is around, and here I am, the younger guy. She was older.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Now, I get a call. Daddy gets called in. Yeah, son. Look, my dad is like, look, the guy's a guy. You know what I mean? Dad is proud of me because I'm going with a girl. So all these cultural things and things of where you are in your neighborhood, my mom, she was just onto it. So for me, moving forward is like knowing about homosexuality. That was around us. That's one. That's my mama's friend, but I don't trust him like that. Right? And it goes on and on. So right down to telling us about if someone. So she already told us, like, if someone tries to touch, nobody touches you there. You see what I'm saying?
So she equipped you with a lot of
she equipped
resources
us to the max, and I think
be aware.
I told that this story, right, where we had a babysitter. It was a family member, and that family member came over. Mom had to work, asked family member to come over, and I'll tell you, we basically bust this tail out of the house. He tried to touch one of my 2 sisters. So this is
had
real.
you not been educated from your mom.
What? When she came in, she's like, where is he? I was like, phew. We knew what to do.
Your sisters could have been victimized.
Exactly. So this is something that I think whatever that wisdom asked me by the Most High Grace, like my mom did not skin up about that.
Yeah.
And neither did we with our children.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, nah. And right down to the point where I shared with my children, it's like, it could be your mama. It could be me. So you got to be able to know that you tell on her to me and he tell, you see?
That's great.
Like, because you have to show them how severe and how close this is going to be to you. No matter who. Mm-hmm. Right? They need to be protected from the closest people to them sometimes. And you can't take that equation out if you're really going to have them being on the cues to understand that this how serious it is.
Yeah. But we also can't shut down children. So when they go to tell and they're watching us for our reaction, if they think we're going to go off our head, they may stop right there.
Correct.
And they might say, no, it didn't happen actually. Right? Because they don't want a crazy parent to go off on their head to the school, to the next door neighbor's house, to the friend's house, and go crazy on because we have to remember this is another little child. But I think how we react is so important. And also depending on the child, right? If that child is already,
That's key.
right? That's key. If the child
That's key.
doesn't have,
You have to know.
if the child has low self-esteem or fear in their life for anything else, or they think they're going to get punished or beaten, they're going to shut down. Because what child wants a beating? I haven't heard one child, none of adult friends that say, yeah, I enjoyed being beaten. Nobody's going to say they enjoyed being beaten. So they're not going to tell, right? Because they don't want to be beaten. They don't want their parent to go crazy and go to school. And so, we always say, first of all, don't deny it. Don't say, and don't ignore it, and don't minimize it.
Yeah. Well, it's probably key to, initially, as hard as it is, to just almost have minimal of a reaction as possible.
Right. Yeah.
And so, every parent should be equipped and prepared to, at some point, know that their child, and they'll be at risk of potentially hearing this one day from their child. No matter how arrogant you are as a parent and how that won't happen to my child, you don't know that. And
Yeah.
if you walk into it as naive as that,
For
Yeah.
real.
you will have a very, very intense reaction that could very well completely have a counterproductive reaction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's go ahead.
I'm sorry, but parents just weren't equipped years ago. Like we
No.
weren't educated
in
on this stuff.
in general, I would say, maybe society-wise, in certain society, it will be uncouth to be having that type of raw conversation, so to speak, right, and not having the words, because it was raw, like it was straight up raw. But I think that, the non-glazing of these important issues is what saved, I think certain communities, like, because in my community, especially in my immediate, we were all very close. So we all knew who got a cut tail or who didn't, and we all knew, like, because that's how it was, right? So you came out the next day, everybody was teasing you because they heard you got a cut tail. So on the other side, it's like, the things that we have to remember is that children are prone to lie. So this is just one of those things that it's not evil. It's just the way how, like, they know they have this feeling, right? And I've been a child once, so I know I can speak to it at least. But during that time, it's just the way how somebody would say. The children would, even though they didn't, they were still inclined to say no, right? So I think we have to be considerate of, one, the parents really understanding your children, to know, like, okay, they're not going to necessarily tell me the truth, but I'm going to take that anyway, and then create the response, right? That, like you're saying, it doesn't go over the top, but it has to allow the truth to come out.
Yes, and
You know what I
especially
mean?
the child who violated the other child. You want
Right.
them to get to a place where they can say, "Yes, I did this."
Right.
You don't want to put
But
the,
that's what I was talking
Yes,
about.
I
too.
love that.
More
Yeah.
importantly, I was talking about that piece.
the child who offended
The
to
child
say,
who
"Okay,
offended,
what's
yeah.
going on?" Because we have to figure out why this child offended.
Correct.
Is the did the child see the guardians in the house having sex? Did the child see something now these days on a device and copying that behavior? Is the child being abused by someone? Get to the root of it instead of just ignoring it, right? Or just
Yeah.
avoiding it.
But the problem is, we know that parents react based on their own series of hypersensitivities and their own defense mechanisms that they've used in their life. So if there's immediate shame, guilt, and then anger comes after that, right? That's the shame and the guilt. Lots of times creates the anger that creates the angered response. And so, which is a defensive response, with their own fear. And so that's what, again, educating parents on how to talk to your children, regardless.
Yeah.
And if they lie to you, if you want the truth, you're not going to get it by beating it out of them or by screaming and yelling at them.
Or shaming them.
They're actually going to, it's going to, like, if you think of layers of protection, a child then creates another layer of protection, and then they dig their heels in and are really going to dig into the lie. So
That's
Yeah.
a good point, I think, that you raised, and it just cued with me because you know what I said in the very beginning. And the any type of discipline measure that takes place is not to try to get something out of them. So any type of punitive action is not the way to go to get something out, right? So I agree with that. The discipline is in the aftermath of knowing the truth, regardless of who, one way or the other, right? Like something has to happen once you know the truth of, okay, this child did this, okay, that happened to that child. So those are the things that you have to massage, a certain way, because you're really trying to find out the truth between children.
Yeah.
That there is no witness.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very
sexual assault there usually isn't witness, whether it's an adult doing it or a child.
Or not,
There's usually
right?
not. They
See
try
what
to
I'm
hide
saying?
it. They go find a hiding place
You
to
see?
do it, right?
So it's a difficult piece in itself.
Yeah.
You
It's a
know what I
balance of
mean?
understanding and discipline.
Yeah.
Right? But again, we can put the discipline. The discipline isn't going to change the child's behavior right away. There has to be, I think, an extended level of trying to understand and get to the bottom of the why. How did this happen? Why did this happen first?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and let them know you're not going to get in trouble for telling. Let the child know that, because that's the first thing a child is going to think is, I'm going to get in trouble.
and I'm
if
going to be responsible for breaking up my family.
Yes,
I'm
going
gonna
to
be blamed.
Yes, absolutely. And so you want to make sure that you react responsibly with the response that's, I'm proud of you for telling me. Thank you for
That's
telling me you
brave.
did the right thing. That was so brave that you told me this. You're not going to get in trouble. What happened to you, especially the child who was harmed, was not your fault. You did not cause this. Let them know that you're going to speak to the parents of the other child, but also maybe say to them, and I'm going to not want that other child to get in trouble, because they might not want to get their friend in trouble or their favorite cousin or their older sibling, because they might have to pay the price later when the parents go out and they're with that older sibling alone. You don't know what.
Well, we're going to do what we can to help them.
Yeah, we're going to do what we can to help the other child too.
help you.
And I will say that if it's a friend whose child did this, or a cousin, and the other family do not react responsibly, you've got to put separation between those children, because the other parent, they have to take on, not taking it on as their blame, as they're a parent. They caused this. No, you didn't. Maybe you haven't had enough conversations with your child about body safety and boundaries and what that looks like. It's not that you're at fault as a parent whose child harmed and violated another child. Don't take that on. Let's just deal with it and get your child the help they need.
Well, yeah, and especially if it's a family situation, or if it's a cousin, for instance. So you've got kind of two segments of a family, and it very well may cause a rift and cause disruption in the family. It may cause the distance and anger between family members. But, as a parent, you have to make a very, very important decision to choose your child first. And, not sacrifice the child, who's the victim,
Right.
over, family members that may need time to digest what's happened.
Yes.
And then, even if you take it a level deeper, you really have to dig within yourself to know, okay, is this about me? Am I afraid to lose my sister, brother, family members as a resource, because I don't want to feel impacted by this particular situation, which may cause them to sacrifice a child. So you'd never want to do that.
Yeah. You want to make sure that you get some support, and speak to someone about it and say, how do we handle this? That's really the best way. And I think it also depends on the age difference between the two children. If you have a 16-year-old who's doing something sexually to a 4-year-old, that is a huge red flag. Do not think that's just hormones or, made a mistake, or the parent of the 16-year-old really does need to take, or 15, or even a 14-year-old and a 4-year-old. Those are too many years difference there. Something's going on, and that cannot be ignored.
Well, some of the statistics show that like anything over 2 years and older, a 2-year difference is a major problem.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. And so what you want to do is, we're not going to call 16, we don't want to say you're a pedophile at 15 or 14. What we want to say is, let's get some help for this 14-year-old or 15-year-old, and let's find out why they're doing this. They could be being abused themselves. They could be in an abusive, have abuse in the home.
neglected.
They could be being neglected, right? And they're it's the only way they have power, because maybe they have no power over their situation that's, that they can't control. And so they're trying to control someone else's little life.
Or finding ways to emotionally regulate themselves. And, unfortunately, going through puberty does sometimes create that.
Yeah, because hormones are real, right? I mean, hormones are real. We can't pretend sex doesn't feel good, or that little boys are going to have an erection, or going to feel these feelings, and especially with a parent who hasn't talked to them about that.
And that's especially, and even if parents who have talked to their children about sex, how the delivery is so crucial too, because you can have a harsh conversation with your child and say, don't you ever do this, and you better not do this, and and you're essentially introducing shame, eliciting shame in the child, or fear, and then they don't know how to navigate those feelings that they do have that feel good.
Right.
Because they've been taught that they're not supposed to have those feelings, and I better not catch you doing A, B, C, and D.
Yeah. So much shame-based years ago, wasn't it?
Well, and see, from a male's perspective, we got to remember that the male child comes into his sexuality from literally almost from birth. So, from a psychosocial perspective, the male child is confronted with his sexuality way before the female is in the fullness, because it's so prevalent. It's right in front of him. It's the way how he used the bathroom. He has to touch himself. I mean, it's right there. So that, coupled with that, what our nature is meant to actually do, is why the high numbers are the way that they are, right? So that's the first piece. So I know a lot of times people are protective of the women, but I think the reason why we got this problem is because we're actually overlooking the sexual nature of the male at a young age. And that is a very crucial piece, because that is the confrontation. It gets an erection when it's as a child, right? It's fondling itself as a child. It's all sorts of pleasure things going on in an innocent nature, but it's a sexuality that's in front of them, right? So when you take that up, and then you project that as to to continue to grow, and that hasn't been fulfilled, or something sparks that nature, the curiosity kicks in. Not all the time it's based on something sinister. A lot of times it's just based on sexual promiscuity and curiosity.
Right.
It doesn't make it right. But, according to how the seriousness of the nature will be there, and the discipline will be carried out as such, especially in the higher realms like you guys were just talking about. You got a 16-year-old, I'm sorry, but no, that ain't going to be an easy word for that young person, regardless, right? Because we need consequence. Either way, they're whatever that measure is, you need consequence.
Yeah.
Right? Because without it, and this is Elmore talking. This doesn't represent scars, people, but from a level. Now I'll make that disclaimer because I think it's important to recognize from a level of how we may look at discipline, and how we may look at what consequences are. One of the reasons why we have the community problems that really persist is because there's not really a consequence that's measurable to what people do.
Correct.
So if you don't have that, when you're coming up young and then having that measure, then that's why things go forth and go south.
Yeah, and can I say consequence comes with love.
It has to come from a place of love. It comes from a place of love, right?
Yeah, not from everybody, but it should, right?
No, but it's a point, right, that we will get to, because that's why when people would say to me, did you give your children licks or did I said, I meet out discipline. Now, if you say that in any crowd around the world, they'll never think that you actually cut that tail to the angst, because you used a word called discipline. So I've never had no issues, because that's the word that I meet out with my children, because it comes with this whole education piece. it's coming from a place of protection of who themselves first, and then others. You know what I mean? So I always ruled on all those things with my family, with my children, and whatever child I come in contact with. If I'm in their care, if they're in my care, they get that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if anybody does anything wrong, and you're right, unfortunately our community is suffering because there's a lack of accountability, and there's too much understanding, there's too much of that, and not enough accountability. And so when you're talking about something like this, there has to be a balance of, yes, we do want to understand where you're coming from. So just like a child, when they do anything wrong, you want to understand the why part.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you avoid giving them any discipline. You
Right.
still have to give discipline.
Yes. Yes. And discipline is important because it helps us grow. It helps us know between right and wrong. But it's the level of that. I mean, I think, some of the stories that I've heard from people who, and I don't want to go down a different road because SCARS needs to stick to sexual abuse prevention and what we do. But, there's a fine line there. And, if somebody hasn't dealt with their own anger and then they start, disciplining a child, where is that really coming from? Where is that discipline coming from? Is it coming from a place of, wanting them to understand, but beating them into understanding that is not going to, that ain't going to make them understand it, right?
Or is it releasing your own anger?
Is it releasing your own anger? And I think that happened many years ago with people I know that, had to kneel on rice or keep their hands lifted for half an hour while, they were, hit with a stick on it. I mean, nothing of that is good. So
that's why you almost want to make sure that as a parent, you're in an emotionally stable place, and you're not, at
reactionary.
a 10, very reactionary.
Reactionary.
Yeah.
We are.
Reactionary, because that's the thing, right? That's the thing. Again, it's another good point. I never, ever discipline my child in anger.
Yeah.
I would let it pass. It could be a day.
Yeah.
It could be 2. But it came. You see? Because I wanted to make sure I was in the right frame of mind to meet out the discipline. And, in our time, when, even for my parents and for many of us parents of that era, there was a whole bunch of words that came with when there's licks, we would call it back then. When those licks came, it was words that went with it. So you knew exactly what each stroke was for.
Yeah.
And that's what you carried away with, right? And that's what the neighbors heard, and so forth. So I think, you have to take that deep breath, think about it, because the truth and all these type of things of the why has to come out, and you had mentioned that why has to be sorted out. They have to have a chance to think through it as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And we have to figure out where it's coming from when it's violating another child. We've got to find out what's going on with the child who violated. Where is this coming from? Get to the truth. Get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Without, like I said, without judgment, shame, anger, fear. We have to react responsibly so we can get the best out of that one that offended, right? That hurt another child.
Yeah, and most times you'll find that there's an emotional need that's not being met, but the child can't articulate that of what they're needing. They're just, children behave, they react.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily, they're not self-reflective.
Yeah.
That's where we come in to have to teach them how to self-reflect, how to think about why they do certain things.
Yeah. And to respect others. I think the biggest thing
definitely.
also is to respect your peers, respect others' boundaries, others' others' physical space and personal space. I don't think there's, enough conversations on what consent looks like. No is no. I don't care if they change their mind just before, they have that whole cup of tea scenario. I don't know if we've ever talked about that on this show. Someone makes you a cup of tea and you change your mind. You're allowed to change your mind.
Yeah.
I don't care if they take 3 hours to make your tea. If you say no is okay. We have to respect people's no's without getting offended and force them to do something they don't want to do.
And the other part too, on both ends, for both the victim and the perpetrator, it's if it feels wrong, it probably is. So.
Yeah, or if it's being hidden.
Yeah,
if something's
yeah,
hidden,
it
you might want to ask
it
yourself
gets-
why you're hiding. Because when we do good things, we want everybody to know.
It gets here. You know, he said that's the whole thing about this whole sexual. You know, it gets hairy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The script flips and changes. You know, it's a moving target.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the
Yeah.
best you could do is, you know, which is what we did. I only speak from my perspectives of
Yeah.
my journey, right? I'm not making nothing up. So, you know, the first protection is no sleepovers. That part.
Yeah.
You know, no disrespect, but no. You know, my children stay in the home.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of disappointment sometimes because they couldn't do that.
Yeah. A
You
lot
know
of
what I'm
parents are
saying?
doing that now.
And I find it like, who, where, how? Like even for my children, you know, if my daughter, hey, if the girls were coming over, they're outgoing. That's mom and all them. That's how we will. Because that protects
You have to
me.
protect you.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about me
Yeah.
at that point. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Because I already know how I stay.
Yeah.
But I don't know how some little girl rolling up in there, 13 years old, coming up there with her little shorts on and all that there's going to carry on and then say, hey, Mr. Warren did X, Y, and Z. So these are the things it goes where we as adults also have to protect ourselves, and then protecting ourselves, we protect
Yeah.
the children, right, as
Yeah.
well. So it's that
Correct.
that piece is
Yeah, don't put
gotta-
yourself in those situations.
Don't put your children in these situations,
Yeah.
and you know it's become this thing where, you know, it's a sacrifice, so to speak, right? You know, whereas you say, hey, you can do the things that you would like to do and take care of your children correctly. Rather, it's, you know, sometimes it's about making that extra money. Well, you know, sometimes it's because you just have to do it and you don't have a trustworthy, you know, person. You can't be judged on that either because you're trying to make the best for, you know, for your life, for your child. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So all these things sort of like rolled on into exposing, you know, young people to situations that, you know, could
Yes.
be unseemly. Like,
And the other thing, Elmore and Dr. Hancock, is letting your child know that I'm leaving you with this person, but you come and tell me if this person ever makes you feel uncomfortable. Don't be afraid of my relationship with this person.
Long time.
And to say to the person, don't ever let me, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm bathing my own child. You don't need to bath them. They're going to bed. And my child also knows that they can come and tell me anything. Because one thing about a perpetrator, they don't want to get caught.
Well,
So-
and also telling your child, like, I will always choose you.
Yes.
Always choose you over anybody else.
Yes, that's really, really important. If you walk in on it and you see two children, you know, when we do discovery, which is walking in on something, you know, no judgment or shame. You know, years ago it would be like, "What are you doing? You know, that's disgusting. You know, put that." You know, no, we don't make children feel condemned or shameful. That's not the way, right? We respond to children because we don't want to condemn them. They're already feeling that. And so it's really just having this conversation, you know, and also think about suspicion. If you're if you notice every time you come into your child's room and they're under the covers with their device, that might be a red flag to say, who are they talking to? You know, because now it's a whole different issue with devices and tablets and children having access to the internet. You know, pay attention. Know who your children are talking to online. Put in those controls. Talk to your children about not sending naked images and what they're sending to other people because they could end up getting in trouble with the law.
Well, and also probably the biggest thing is be involved.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not involved in your kid's life and you just expect them to come and talk to you and you don't really have much of a connection, they're not talking to you about, you know, their troubles or things that are going on in their life, they're not going to talk to you about the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of parents that are busy. They've got 2 or 3 jobs, and I get it. It's very difficult. But you need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to make your child feel special and to make that child feel connected to you and that they're important to you.
Yeah. Very important. Yeah. And no topics off limits. You know,
No,
years
not at
ago
all.
we couldn't. You just didn't have conversations with your with their parents and guardians about certain things. But we got to make sure that those doors are always open for our children. Like nothing's off limits.
And for parents, if it's uncomfortable for you, then talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Find a way, find some resources so that you can become more comfortable talking.
Yeah.
Getting a script, getting, help from, help from resources that can guide you on what to say, how to say it.
The best resource is Google. I mean, you can Google anything.
Yeah.
How do I talk to my child who's
I tell my children though, just don't take the first answer that comes
No.
up.
True.
Yeah.
It only means it's the most popular. It does
True.
not mean it's correct.
That's so true, Elmore.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay?
really good point.
Okay, that's all I tell them because I'll be having those conversations with my children too, and they'll go straight to, and they was like, yeah, but
Because
how
it
you
could
did
be
is
somebody's
correct.
opinion.
Yes,
not
yeah,
actual
it's not
fact.
necessarily
Yeah.
the fact.
Yeah.
So I always
Yeah.
tell my children, research is always
Yeah.
research. It doesn't mean the first thing you stop
No.
with. That's not research.
But I think
Halt the dopamine.
yeah, but I think we can agree that when it comes to stuff like this, the most important thing is to listen, is to stay calm, is to allow silence longer than you're used to.
True.
Is to respond in a loving, nurturing, a compassionate, empathetic, kind way. That is the difference, and it's hard. It's hard to do that when we as parents haven't. We've got all the stuff on our plate. We're busy. We're stressed about other things, whether it's money or some of the people out, are struggling with even paying the bills, or maybe there's been some trauma in the family. It's just so hard to remember all these things, isn't it?
They say that you get what they say. You get more bees with honey or
Yes.
something like
Oh,
that.
yes, yeah.
You get right. You could track.
Yes.
Well, you get the honey first.
Yes.
Then everything, depending on which side of the coin it falls, then the sting could come.
Then you get rid of the bees.
then the bees, then you
Yeah.
get the bee.
But,
so it still depends on like I said, you're speaking from a victim perspective, and then you're speaking from the other side. But both need to have that sense of care, because the outcome is going to be different for one and the other. One's going to carry it for the rest of their life. The other one could grow up and forget it ever happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's two different sides. So whatever the memory's got to be for the perpetrator, like that's what it's going to be, because you're going to have to remember that too.
Yeah.
Because they got to remember it. They're
Yeah.
going to live with it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Depending on the age and time, it's
Yeah.
something that trauma could live with them forever.
But that child who did it could have been abused themselves and did not get that intervention, and so they're putting that on another child, or they're, hurt people. We know that, and go on might go on to hurt people, but people's pain comes out in different ways. But some may want to hurt others.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, children's behavior always means something, and it's not always the obvious.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think reacting responsibly is the most important thing with
Yeah.
anything. And, but don't ignore it. If
Yeah.
you're the parent whose child hurt another, sexually harmed another child, please get some support around that. We have great resources on our website, scarsbermuda.com. Come in and sit in a SCARS training. It's free. Learn what you can do to react responsibly so you can be prepared of these. But don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. Don't deny it. Don't minimize it. If your child has done something to another child sexually, get to the root of the problem. Right?
Well, otherwise you put them at risk for either offending again or being another victim, But when communicating with your child, if the child feels like a burden or you interrogate them, you will not get the information you need
Yeah.
to act responsibly.
All children want to know is that the people in their life love them, care for them, are there for them, can rely on them. This is what children want. That's all they want. They have the people in their life who will stand by them and get to the root of whatever has happened in their life, because they love them and they care about them, and they're there to let's get the best outcome of this situation.
It's interesting because as you talked about SCARS training, I was one of the first in the first cohort
Yes.
of SCARS, and thinking back on that, what that impact would have had on my life in relationship to how I dealt with my children. So that's a part of like that whole education piece, and what helped shape shape my children's journey in that too. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, you got to reach for those things, and you need a community. You need that support around, you know, that's ready to reinforce that type of stuff, you know, as well, that type of education. So sharing it with, you know, as simple things like sitting on Santa's knee. No, don't happen. You know, like, hate is, you know, like those type of things are they'll be considered to be anti-social or anti-not friendly. You know what I mean? But those are the things I felt with my family to make them see that that's how serious it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't care who got offended.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, children first.
That's it. My
Your children are not
first.
going to have any long-term,
You know.
you know, consequences for not having done that. So.
Yeah, and it's modeling that behavior in the home, Elmore. It's like modeling. Your children are sponges. They're watching how the people in their life are responding. If there is somebody in their home that is not respecting the boundary of another adult in the home, guess what? That child's watching that. Do you think that child's going to go to school and care about the boundaries of another student or another child or a friend if they're watching that that's okay in the home? That's copied behavior. It's not even the child's fault because they're watching. They're like sponges, and they're watching and saying, "Well, you know, this is disrespected. I can do it too. It's okay. It's acceptable." And we as adults are the stewards of the children that we are responsible for in our life, and we have to model that behavior. And I'm not saying I was perfect, because trust me, my daughter was on this show, and I wasn't the perfect parent. But the one thing my girls can say is love. They felt loved. Oh, they got spanked on their hands when I told them 3 times not to touch something.
What?
And
You spanked your
I did on their
No,
hands.
you
I will
didn't.
say it. They probably won't spank theirs.
It comes out. She really
But,
don't need
but
discipline.
no, I did. I know they got a spank. If I told them 3 times, they're a little bum and they're little. But I never touched their.
out.
No, but I never. No, I know. I'll be there. I've admitted it. I didn't hit them in their face. I hit them
No,
on their bum
no.
and their hands. If I
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
tell them 3 times, and I would remind them before we went in the grocery store. These are the boundaries. You know, I would give them in advance, but I was taught that. Somebody taught me how to do that instead of, you know, so there's no surprises. But it's really, that's got to come from home, and it's teaching them about boundaries. It's teaching them about inappropriate versus appropriate behavior when you're with others, and promoting that positive reinforcement.
Well, and also creating an atmosphere that we take care of each other as a family. And, you know, more than likely, if you have that framework inside your home that we take care of each other and protect each other, then you're less likely to have any significant issues.
Yeah.
Well, you're ready to mitigate them at least, you know what I
Yes,
mean?
correct.
Like, you know, because, you know, things happen.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, I mean, the main thing is, you know, knowing that anything can happen. And that's the
Yep,
key,
correct.
like with life,
Don't
you
be
know what I
naive.
mean?
Don't be naive. Yeah.
Anything can happen, like, you know.
And it's not like, I think a lot of parents then also have the mentality of, oh, well, I do this, and this, nothing's ever going to happen to my children, you know, and even if it did, I would do A, B, C, and D, but don't ever believe for a second that nothing can ever happen to your children, you know, and it's not always, the thing is, it's not always about how you parent,
No.
you know.
No, exactly.
So-
Exactly. And the other
Yeah.
thing I want to talk about before we finish the show is about bullying, right? Like, you know, I've probably said it already on the show, like, I'll never forget a lady who shared with me that she was abused, sexually molested by her older brother. And she said, Debbie, he was a bully. My parents never recognized the bullying behavior in the house. They never called it out. He would force me to do things I didn't want to do, even little things that had nothing to do with sexual things. And it wasn't. It was his crossing my boundaries was never intervened. And and she said he's a bully to today. He's still a bully.
And particularly so as boy, like for instance, you know, it doesn't even matter what gender, but if that child through the entire time has been able to bully their little younger sibling, then when they come into puberty, guess what? There's another added component of, well, I can do what I want, so I can do what I want.
When it comes to this, when it comes to sex. yeah, this is, this is tough stuff. But it's reality, and the only way we can prevent it is by talking about it. It's like little ones, and we've had the conversation before. With scars, it's when especially little ones who, and I'm going to put it right out there, everyone, is masturbate. If that's a comforting place, a place for comfort for a little one, and another little one sees that, who doesn't know what that means or is, that might traumatize the child that's watching that. It doesn't make the child who's doing it bad. It just says we have to do certain things privately. We don't traumatize, we don't do this. And then we talk about how can we get their mind off that, because that can become a habit. That can become something am I correct in saying that, Dr. Hancock? Like it can become every time I'm stressed, I'm going to do this. And if they're never taught, well, we got to have a little self-control around this. That they could run to that every time. Then they're going to have expectations when they get older, right? It can become addictive in a way. Would you say?
For sure.
Absolutely. And I think this is where we have to, and not to shame the child who's doing it. It's not what we do. We just really have an explanation about privacy, because it can be very traumatizing to another child who watches that.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if the younger child who's watching doesn't understand.
Debbie's looking at me.
I'm looking for you to.
In my neighborhood, get out of that.
Elmore, no.
Get out of that. You get out. Hey.
No.
Look, once again, right? The cultural appropriation and cultural differences, like that's look, this thing about sexuality, this is as a beast. Because it's a part of our nature, like it's one of our soul's purposes is to procreate. It is something that you really don't have to teach. It will just happen, right? So however you find yourself in, the first thing is one, when you're a parent, did you want to be a parent? Establish your whole parenthood reasoning. And then from there, you realize how much you care for this child. Yeah. And you're the steward. You don't earn it. Right. You're a steward over the child. So now you start realizing you have to take care of the child. It's not just because it's your property. You can do anything you want or anybody can do. No, you are a steward over the child. You know what I'm saying? So you take care of it. With your heart, soul, your mind, and your body, and if anything should go awry from there, then God help the person that abuses that particular privilege. Like, that's how I come from. That's my culture. That's where I come from. And that's what I'll share with those who want to take whatever they want to take from that, because it's so diverse.
Yeah. It is.
You speak to a group. I'm speaking to a group right now that you not necessarily would be reaching.
Yes.
But that's the whole point.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's what it's about. Because they see me up here and say, Elmore, that wasn't you. Yeah, but this is me. Because I know it's for the best to be honest and sure.
Yes.
Right? Because that's how real conversations get started.
Yes.
When they see people are uninhibited about being real about who they are, first and foremost.
Correct.
And then, you know what I mean? You're able to share. So that's how, it's got to be one of the toughest things you're going to deal with in life is the thing about sexuality and sex.
It is.
It's just tough.
It is. But I want to say thank you.
Yeah. And
thank you, Elmore Warren, for your input. It's it's good to have male voices in this in this space as well. We need to hear from our men. It's very, very important. Dr. Hancock, definitely. Your wisdom is always appreciated. In closing, I just want to say, parenting is not a job, it's a journey. And teaching is not a job, it's a purpose. So even if you heard one thing today that touched your spirit, we would have done our job around awareness. Starting the conversation on boundaries and body safety is critical for your child, other children, and our community. And reacting responsibly on this topic is also critical, whether it's a disclosure from a child who was abused or a disclosure when you heard that your child harmed somebody, whether it was a discovery or a suspicion. When it comes to child-on-child sexual harm, intervening early and appropriately will contribute to the best outcome for both children. Remember, please respond with love, calmness, and compassion. These are children. They're not mini adults. And we're going to encourage you, if you have never come into a SCARS training, get SCARS certified, please. It's free education, thanks to our corporate and community donors. And it could save your child from years of emotional pain. If you have to report a case of child sexual abuse, the numbers are Child and Family Services Kids Hotline, 278-9111, the Bermuda Police Service, 211 or 295-0011. You can also make an anonymous call at 800-8477. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Our next Survivor Hour is scheduled Wednesday, March 5th, everyone, at 1:15. On behalf of SCARS, thank you, Elmore, once again for coming with us today and having your wisdom on the show. Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Thank you,
as
Bermuda.
always.
Thank you, Bermuda Broadcasting. Thank you, Dr. Hancock. Remember, children are not mini adults, everyone, and they all matter.
Thank you for tuning in to SCARS Survivor Hour on Power 95. Join us again next month on the first Wednesday at 1:15. Remember, your story matters, and together we can make a difference.